Ashley Taylor with the Orange County Library System here at the West Oaks branch in Ocoee, Florida on uh, February 20th, 2013, capturing many memories from our community. Please tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Robert Raymond, and I'm from everywhere. I'm from a Navy family, so I've moved all over, but I've made Orlando my home since 1981.
And what brought you to the area?
My parents lived here originally, and when I graduated from Virginia Tech, I was looking for somewhere to base out of while I looked for a job and just fell in love with the local area.
And what are some of your earliest memories of living here in Orlando?
I remember how the town smelled like oranges all through February. You'd always smell the orange blossoms. There were still orange trees all around the area. I remember the Fairbanks Bridge and everybody proposing to each other. You know, there'd be a banner up on the Fairbanks Bridge once a week for proposing to somebody. So I remember that. So yeah, a lot of memories of the town.
And I'm told you have some very interesting hobbies.
Yes. Well, besides being a writer, I also used to fly ultralight aircraft. I built a small, as small as a two-stroke Iper Quicksilver, and I had it. I mounted it with pontoons on it so I could take off of lakes, and I was based out of Lake Apopka. That was where our air park was. I used to fly around all the time, and one time I was flying south, more or less over Ocoee, just making my way south, and all of a sudden the engine started malfunctioning, and it dropped down to about 30% horsepower. And I couldn't understand what was wrong, and I took a look over my shoulder, and I couldn't make it back. There was no way to make it back to Lake Apopka, and I couldn't really land on the ground because I had pontoons. So I'm looking around for lake, and I see Lake Stark in front of me. So I think I kind of put my head back where I can see where I'm going to kind of go, and I can make it just to the edge of the lake. So I'm gliding down and coaxing the engine with what power it's got left, and I think I'm going to make it. It was early in the morning. I could even remember seeing the commuters out there, all the cars. I'm thinking, oh, I wish I was down there. And that's when I saw the power lines along the northwest shore, that there was a line of power poles. And I managed to pull back on the stick just enough to get over the top of the power lines. I remember the plane just about to stall, and I made it over the power lines and pushed down on the stick to get my airspeed up and looked down, and there was an alligator in the lake. And I thought, oh, this is like an Indiana Jones movie. I landed in the lake, couldn't really taxi around. The engine was still, so it drifted. There used to be at the time, there used to be a lot of reeds on the edge of the lake, and I drifted into those, and I'm sitting there, and nobody's riding any boats. It's the middle of a work day. So I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? And I'm tinkering with the engine. I give it a smack on the side because I'm so mad, and that's when the spark plug wire dropped out. So I pushed the plug back in and tried to start it. And of course, I hadn't backed the throttle down, so I tried to start it. The engine went up to full speed, and I almost fell out. And then I finally managed to get it going right and turned it around and got the longest part of this round lake and got it upwind and pointed into the wind and managed to get back out of the lake without hurting anybody in Ocoee. So it was quite an adventure.
And how did you get into flying?
Oh, flying? Well, I'd always been interested in World War I aviation and aviation in general. And when I was I had a job in Miami. I moved out for a little bit. While I was in Miami working in a lumber yard, I wrote a game called Eagles that was produced by Strategic Simulation Incorporated, and that got me a lot of money. And so I was going back to college, and I decided I wanted to build an airplane. And that's how I ended up getting into flying. I eventually, after the ultralight, I actually decided that was fun in a risky sort of 20s way, and I'd better grow up. So I actually got a private pilot's license, and I flew Cessnas and some heavier aircraft, and even got a chance to fly the MetLife blimp once. So that was a lot of fun too.
I also hear you're an author.
Yes, I've actually written 3 books. I wrote Don't Jettison Medicine, contracted by a couple of doctors to talk about physician worries and whether they want to stay in. I wrote a book called Fire and Bronze about a Phoenician princess. It was a historic fiction. I wrote that, and it was published in 2005 and had wide distribution. I was really happy with that. And then I self-published a book called Early Retirement, which I self-published last year, and that's about a computer programmer who falls back in time. Because every time travel book I ever read, the hero always knows something, or he knows the time, or he knows something like how to make a steel mill or how to make gunpowder. Well, my guy doesn't know anything, and I thought that was kind of the neat trick. Was he's just a normal guy like us who falls back in time.
What plans do you have for the future?
The future, I'm still writing books. I actually have a book underway right now that's I'm starting to ship out to publishers called Indigo, which deals with crows and flying. And it actually is crows living in Orlando, and I had to learn all about how crows are and how they live. And it takes up, it has the climactic scene, takes place during Hurricane Charlie. So it's the crows dealing with that.
And are you planning to spend the next several years in Orlando as well?
I think so. You know, we've always talked about retiring, and we drive around and look for places we perhaps want to retire, but it never quite compares to what we've got in Orlando. So we'll probably stay here for some time.
What do you think is the great benefit to living in Orlando?
One of the things I like seeing right now is that Orlando's got a growing bicycle network, and I commute by bicycle about half the days. I work up in Maitland, and I live down in Colonial Town, so I'm finding it more and more bike trails are opening up, and it's becoming more and more of a alternative transport for this area.
Do you have any other stories of Orlando you'd like to share?
Oh boy, give me a chance to think about that for just a sec. I'm trying to think what from back in the day, what I remember about Orlando. It was I remember it being such a nice little town back then, and boy, I was just looking at those pictures and realizing it's grown. When I was looking at Lake Stark on the map, just to remind myself where everything was laid out, I couldn't. It's got the 417 or whatever that extension of the Beltway comes right through there, and it's like I remember when that was nothing out there. There were chicken farms and orange groves and stuff, and now it's all just it's got the Beltway and everything. So it's amazing how much the town has grown. The stories don't let me think about that. I just remember, I'll tell you what I remember of Orlando was back in the 80s that the skyline was so much smaller downtown, and the big building was the CNA building was down there, and you can actually see it in the movie Daryl. They filmed Daryl downtown Orlando, and it was so exciting to see the CNA building. Remember when they imploded our downtown City Hall for Lethal Weapon 2, and it was just neat to see the city grow around me and how big it's gotten and how much it's changed. So, is good?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming out and speaking to us.
Thank you very much.